Alright, so for my final project, I decided to create a blog called the Dystonia Diaries. The blog focuses on my research on dystonia, which is a rare muscle movement disorder that affects my niece. I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree in biology, and I plan to continue school so I can research dystonia and other neurological disorders in more depth. So what is dystonia? So it's muscle movement disorder, and it can best be described as long-lasting, severe Charlie horse. So it's painful, and it immobilizes the affected muscles. And it can affect one area of the body, like what's shown in this picture, or it can be more generalized, which is what my niece has. So what's shown in the picture is cervical dystonia, and that affects the neck. Obviously, there's a lot of twisting in the neck, and it is very uncomfortable. What my niece has affects her limbs, especially her legs, and it also affects her vocal cords. So she actually, over the last few years, has lost her ability to speak entirely because her vocal cords are just stretched so tight. Many dystonias are genetic, and Sophie's, my niece, it's been determined to be genetic. So I created my blog by pulling research that I had already done for previous projects and newer research from scientific journals. I then put together a quick layout on WordPress, and I was sure to create an about section that explains what dystonia is and put a little context on the blog so that people who had never heard about it would go in knowing what I was talking about and knowing a little bit about dystonia. I also see my niece at least once a week. We're really close. So I used our Hangouts as inspiration for some of the blog posts. When I was planning my project, I wanted to be sure to have plenty of research on the blog. As I'm going into scientific research, I obviously wanted to keep it more facts-driven and just kind of education-driven. But I also wanted the blog to be a reflection of my time with my niece, because as she gets older, she's almost 10 now, I'm just always looking for new ways to connect with her, especially since we can't communicate verbally. We can only communicate through text or through social media or, other nonverbal ways of communicating. So I wrote the post with the possibility that she might read them one day. And that's why I included an inspirational quote by one of my favorite people that ever lived, Nelson Mandela. I just thought that it would tie in nicely with each blog post. So I tried to stick with one post a week. That was pretty much my goal over about a 4-week period. But with my work and school schedule, it was kind of hard to keep up with. So I ended up getting 3 posts in during the time I was working on it. And now I've just been kind of keeping up with it in my spare time. So for the competencies used, I used a few more than this, but these are the ones that I'm going to focus on. So I use managing information, higher order thinking, and communication. So for managing information, I used Google Drive a lot. I use Google Drive all the time at work, and I know my way around it a lot, so it just kind of came naturally to organize all of the stuff that I was going to use for my blog. As you can see here, I've got this PowerPoint. I've also got an older PowerPoint and just some older docs that I used to store research. So I also use the higher order thinking. So obviously going through scientific journals, a lot of it can be pretty dense, and a lot of it is relevant but not necessarily relevant to the specific disorder that I'm researching. So I had to break it down into constituent parts and determine how the parts relate to one another. Also, obviously, a big part of a blog is communicating with people and presenting that information clearly and accurately. So that kind of ties in with the about section that I had mentioned earlier, just explaining concisely what dystonia is, so that somebody that didn't have any knowledge of it going into reading my blog would have a framework. And obviously, any sort of blogging is going to involve evaluating sources and drafting and editing and all of that. So for the future, I do plan to continue the blog and use it to connect to my niece in creative ways. And also, I think it can be a convenient place to hold research in addition to Google Drive. And then the benefits of a blog is it's public, so I can potentially get feedback from other people that are involved in dystonia research or interested in dystonia research. Thank you for checking out my blog. Have a good spring break.